Hi, everyone. I'm Davis Guggenheim, and I have the honor to interview and have a conversation with the great Robert Greene, whose film Procession is now hitting theaters and streaming, and the world is starting to take notice. It's a pleasure to talk to you. How are you?
Thanks, man. Thanks. How are you doing?
Good. You're in Missouri, right?
I'm on campus here in Columbia, Missouri at Mizzou here at the Missouri School of Journalism. Yeah.
Yeah. Robert, not only being a brilliant filmmaker, runs the film program there. For people who haven't seen Procession, it'd be easy to see that film as one thing, and I won't say what that one thing is, but I'm so curious how you would describe your movie to someone who's never seen it, and what they're about to watch.
Well, there's that elevator pitch kind of version, which is 6 survivors come together to face their own abuse at the hands of Catholic priests when they were children. And they do that by creating these scenes together, which depict rituals of power, nightmares, anything they want. Basically, they try to take power back from the church that took so much power from them. But the non-elevator pitch version, I would say, is it's a film about faith and brotherhood and family and trying to do something. It's a film about what trauma actually does to you. Not the traumatic event itself. We're not recounting that. We're not going into sort of awful details about what happened to these guys when they were boys at the hands of clergy and Catholic clergy. But it really is like how it affects you every single day and what you could actually do. And in our case, it is embracing art therapy. It's embracing the idea that making a movie together can be transformative, that actually creating these scenes, going back to places of abuse, watching someone try to reclaim power actually can be incredibly cathartic in and of itself.
You say making a film together, and so many documentarians say that.
Yeah.
You actually did it. Like, explain to,
No, I appreciate that.
A lot of documentaries say, hey, we made this film together, and it's kind of like you hugged at the end of the shoot. In this case,
yeah,
it's 4 years. Tell us what the process is groundbreaking and quite extraordinary.
I appreciate the way you frame that. Yeah, I do think there is a lot of lip service towards collaboration, but here's the truth. It's very difficult to fully collaborate with people that you're filming with, because the truth is that there is an old standard of journalism, sort of journalistic practice, which is that you need some separation between the film that you're making and the people that you're filming with. That makes a lot of sense for a lot of films. For us, it makes no sense, because when I'd been sort of looking for a long time at ways to be genuinely collaborative rather than, as you rightly point out, sort of lip service collaborative, right? And early in the process, so the way this whole film came about is we had made Bisbee 17, which you executive produced as well. And someone asked me why I didn't have a therapist there for the large-scale recreation of the historically traumatic event at the center of that film. And my answer was totally inadequate. I was not prepared to answer the question. That got me thinking about what therapeutic cinema actually looks like. I learned about drama therapy, which is the intentional use of dramatic elements like theater elements and role play for therapeutic goals, which dovetails directly with my filmmaking that I've been doing for many years. And I was very excited about how those two things talk to each other. Drama therapy was a way in to think about the next step for me. It was like learning about drama therapy was an amazing thing. And so I went to Rebecca Randalls, who was the lawyer for the 6 guys that end up in the film. And she told me something that was so important. You just can't take their power away, because that was what happened when they were abused. The abuser, the entire system of the church continually took their power away one moment after another. And you can't do that. And of course, my answer, sort of speaking to, your initial tone there, were like, oh, of course I won't take power. But making a film is all about power dynamics. That's what we ultimately had to contend with, is how do we focus this into a thing that is a film that will help other people? And how do we also make it so it can help the guys themselves?
I can testify to the fact that I was at Telluride when the film premiered. and saw your subjects walking around Telluride, and their eyes were wide open at the mountains, and they were in a movie. It's incredible. But each in their own way, they embodied healing. There are a lot of movies at Telluride, a lot of movies out now that deal with trauma, because I think it's a potent idea, because so many, the whole country's been through trauma, right? But this is a movie that deals with trauma, and actually in the process of making it, in the process of watching it, in the process of being a subject of it, even more importantly, people are healed. Tell us about how the subjects in your movie were healed.
Let me just say this. Nothing will ever fix what happened to these guys. They were abused, not just by the abuser, but by a belief system that they had completely bought into or were indoctrinated into. Nothing can fix that. But debilitating aspects of dealing with shame and dealing with guilt, it's incredible how much guilt you feel when you're abused in this way. You feel like somehow it was your fault because this guy who did this to you is considered to be close to God. I mean, that is such a upsetting, disturbing, thing, right? So every single day you're dealing with the fact that you were put in this situation, right? The shame of sort of going into a dark hole and sort of not connecting with this and not wanting to talk about it for your whole life just builds and builds and builds. That's what we could actually help with. So for example, Joe, one of the 6 men, has had nightmares for 20 plus years that were the actual catalyst for him remembering what happened to him were these nightmares. But every single night, even after he had dealt with the memories and realized that they were memories, he kept having these nightmares. We go back to the lake where a lot of his abuse happened, a lake house in a place called Lake Viking. And then the next day, his nightmares were gone, which is just the tip of an iceberg. One of the things we realized is these guys, what they needed most was brotherhood. They needed to be believed. They needed to take this thing that had been rotten inside of them and turn it into something productive where they could actually say, no, I'm not a victim. I'm a survivor. I've actually done something with this. I've actually made something out of my own misery so that you, the viewer, and other survivors can watch it and get something yourself out of it. They needed to be productive. And that erased the shame as much as possible and erased nightmares and erased a lot of the feelings that they've been holding for such a long time.
For those who haven't seen the movie, this Mike is like one of the most injured. They're all injured and traumatized, but he talks about how he hasn't had a relationship his entire life.
Yeah.
And, he comes to Telluride, he's seen the movie, and who does he bring with him? His girlfriend.
His girlfriend. They met when he was working on her deck. And then he started, talking about, hey, I'm in a movie and this is what the movie's about. So literally what led to him having his first girlfriend of his entire life, and he's in his 50s, what led to that was not being ashamed of what happened to him and being proud of making a movie. It seems so obvious. It's like just being proud of yourself. Just being proud of what you can do, what you've done together with these other guys.
I can say, having watched the film, not having had this experience that these men have had, that it was healing for me. And you might see this film as one type of film, and it leads to my next question, but it is heavy at times, but also full of joy and laughter and humanity. And I just want to thank you for giving me that as a viewer. I'm so excited that this is on the Academy site, because it gives me the chance to talk about you as a filmmaker. And nonfiction gets sort of put in a box, and the great thing is that the last few years nonfiction has been ripping that box to shreds, and you're one of them. I mean, you're what you've been doing over your last several films has been so adventurous and form breaking and cinema at its most beautiful. And I'm curious, you're a professor of cinema at University of Missouri. If you weren't Robert Greene, I hope I don't put you on the spot here, and you were saying, oh, there's this guy, Robert Greene over here, and I'm looking at his films. What is the continuum of this guy, and how is his voice and his process changed over the scope of this film, specifically in this idea of performance, which I think is such a key thing to your work?
Yeah, for me, it's about the idea of working in sort of performance and documentary, this sort of contradictory idea, performance and nonfiction. When you say it, it sounds either bad or contradictory. It's about being real about what the process actually is and who says yes to being in films and what can we learn from actually, filming people and editing their stories together to get at deeper things other than the surface reality of what we're seeing. What's changed is sort of realizing, for me over the course of my career, realizing that I was interested in this in the first place. I made a film called Katie with an I, which was about my sister. And then there was a review written where someone says she gives one of the best performances of the year. And I realized, oh, this is more like Grey Gardens than it is like Primary, meaning what I'm interested more in the way that she's playing to the camera and sort of revealing her own ideas about adulthood and being a human being in the world than I am the actual interactions of like the day-to-day interactions. She's revealing something because you can see that she's performing.
If I was to look at like Scorsese, you'd say, well, he couldn't have made Goodfellas without Raging Bull.
Sure. Yeah.
And he couldn't have made Raging Bull without Mean Streets, right? Sure. And I look at, the first film that I saw of yours was Kate Plays Christine. And when I first saw it, I was like, what is he doing here? You film an actress whose job is to play her.
Yeah.
And you say, okay, I'm as interested in her performance of that to sort of open up and find some truth.
Yeah. When you think about Procession, we've heard the headlines countless times about this priest abuse scandal that's just unfolding. It's monumental. There's so many victims, so many perpetrators. It goes on so big that we can't truly process it. Headlines, stories, none of it allows us to process it. But when you find this other method, watching survivors create their own scenes and then watching those scenes play out, there is a through line that can be created that takes us to some other thing. Meaning I don't know that I could go and film someone, just telling their story and then talking to like the officials, and I can't do that. But I know how to make a movie, and I also know the power and the limitations of creating these scenes. It's just about deeper realities. It's just about things that can't be said otherwise. And for me, it's discovery. It's like, we've done that. We discovered what it feels like to conjure the past in Bisbee and how palpable that past becomes in the present. Well, what do we do now? Well, now let's give the keys to these survivors and see what they can do. And so all that healing just comes from a belief in the power of movies. I know that seems so cheesy, but I can't tell you how true it is. It's belief in the power of images for the viewer, but it's also belief in the power of the cathartic act of making the film together, of building something. Like these guys all to one degree or another are builders, and watching them build is phenomenal. Because
we're talking you're talking theory and concept, but give us a visceral example of how you built the film together.
The scenes themselves are all co-created by all of us. There's various versions of that. Michael's version in the film is he wants to film the rituals and symbols. So he goes super deep into the actual physical objects that we use and then wants to turn that into a horror movie. He literally walked into a church, and you see this in the film. He walks into a church, he and Dan are talking, and he just has the moment of idea. He's like, ooh, what if the boy runs to the balcony? And what if everyone turns around? And what if Tom, who's playing the priest, has the green eyes that are from Joe's nightmares? And then you see us do it. And the power really comes from the fact that Michael has told you why he wants to make that scene. It's about indicting those people, the enablers who are in that church, that they can't see the green eyes, but they turn in this look at the boy in the balcony. So when you see that scene later, and you've actually seen it before already in the film, the intention mixes with the images themselves and gives it this depth of feeling where you're like, this is what a survivor of this abuse wants me to understand. There's that kind of thing, which is very creative and powerful. Then there's the kind of thing where like Joe, we're setting up for a confessional scene, basically. And the idea was that Michael and Joe, at the end of the day, we just wanted Tom and Tarek, the boy in the film, just to get Dan's lines across. Dan has, you see it in the film, Dan has a very specific line that he would say to not have to talk to the priest in a confessional. Very early on, Joe says, I was abused in a confessional, and we didn't know that. And all of a sudden, he starts to having a convulsive, triggering episode. And in that moment, it's like all hands on deck. Everyone turns to Joe, and in that moment, it's either we could just say, stop it, which we did. We said, do you want to stop? And he says, no, I don't want to stop. And just watching him grab that bull by the horns and plunge in there, he turns the scene from a simple like delivery of some lines into a cathartic experience where it becomes clear that he has literally walked through the darkness and walked back out.
I can testify, having seen the film many times, but also being at Telluride, that what you just described is an incredible experience for everyone in the theater. And I just want to thank you for making this movie. It's great cinema. It does prove that storytelling has tremendous power. It challenges me as a documentarian to say, gosh, how can I do more and how can I do better? You're breaking rules and breaking boundaries and changing nonfiction in the most incredible way. It's so exciting to have this film out in the world.
I appreciate it, Davis. Thank you so much.
Thank you for making the film, and I encourage everyone who hasn't seen it to watch it. It's truly special.